Being a chartered manager means that you are a specialist in that area, and it means you've got all the skills to do the job to the best of its ability.
You are seen as a leader, a true leader who has credentials behind the great work you've already been doing.
It's enhanced my understanding, it's enhanced my skill set, it's improved my mindset.
It makes all the difference.
This session is recorded and will be available on the CMI website and YouTube channel. Join the conversation by using the live chat box for your questions and comments. We'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Dive into Resilience, a journey of leadership and determination digital event. My name is Aaliyah and I am an events delivery coordinator at CMI. Don't forget to join the conversation by using the live chat box. Feel free to ask any questions you have for the speakers, and we'll answer as many as possible during the Q&A session. I will now hand over to Emma Bell-Davis, Events Lead, CMI Wales Board, to begin today's event.
Thanks, Alia. Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. It's really nice to see so many people interested in this topic. So good afternoon. I'm really delighted to welcome you to our fireside chat. As Alia said, dive into resilience, a journey of leadership and determination. So I'm going to be your host today. My name is Emma Bell-Davis. I'm the events lead for the CMI Wales Regional Board, and I'm going to be hosting our discussion. Outside of my voluntary role in CMI, I work as an executive coach, both privately and for an apprenticeship provider called Corndell, where I support senior leaders in business with their leadership and management skills. Many of the people that I work with hold senior leadership positions with huge responsibilities to deliver in their day jobs, and the conversations that we have are varied, but often around building resilience for themselves, in times of stress and overwhelm, and how to keep strong for their team when there's really challenging headwinds. Alongside my various roles, I'm also an open water swimmer. I compete in winter and summer events of multiple distances, and all in what we call skins, which for those uninitiated means a standard swimsuit only. And whilst enjoying this activity, this is where I met our guest today. So I'd like to welcome Eleanor to our session. Eleanor's life has been defined by faith, resilience, and an extraordinary spirit. Born into a Methodist family, she moved often during childhood. After earning a theology degree from Exeter University, she worked with vulnerable youth before training for ministry at Queen's College, Birmingham. Ordained in 1984, Eleanor served in circuits across Wales, Yorkshire, Northumberland, Shropshire, Cornwall and Norfolk, including a decade as an agricultural and rural chaplain. Eleanor enjoyed bodyboarding and coastal rock scrambling in Cornwall prior to sustaining spinal injuries in car accidents in her 20s and 30s. Since then, Eleanor has defied expectations by becoming a long-distance open water swimmer. To date, she has completed the Dart 10K, Great North and East Swim, 6K River Arun, across the Solent, and twice swam the English Channel in a relay, raising over £30,000 for a charity called Aspire, which supports spinal injury rehabilitation. Her courage in the water mirrors her strength in ministry, and I'm really excited to have you here, Eleanor, and to see you on screen, because normally we're in the water together. So this is really exciting to have this conversation, and our topic today is resilience, leadership and determination. So should we get started? Eleanor, are you happy to get started? Yeah. So, Eleanor, how did your experience of spinal injury twice shape your understanding of resilience? What does that look like to you?
In some ways, it's very simple. You give in or you keep going. You sit in a corner or not. After the first car accident, I took a few weeks off, but then went back to work as a youth and community worker and ran a 2-week children's holiday club wearing my surgical collar. Not the same one, obviously. After the second car accident, once again, a car went into the back of me at a roundabout. My only colleague had just gone on a much needed holiday, so it was carry on as usual.
Yeah, so it's a case of needing to, isn't it, Eleanor? with
Yes.
these things, yeah, needing to kind of carry on. And we've got some great pictures of you on the screen now, with all of the various challenges that you've done, which is lovely to see. So some of you when you've been swimming in lakes in Wales, and then the one on the far right with two people in the water is me and you. And as you can see there, Eleanor tows her crutches behind her, on a special tow float so that she can access the water and get out wherever she needs to. And I'm sort of there to help support that. So thank you for sharing that slide. Let's move on to the next question. So what role does physical challenge play in building mental strength and emotional resilience? What would you say, Eleanor?
Initially, I wear a surgical collar. So what? I can still do things. Then, after a few years, okay, now I've got elbow crutches. That's a bit more limiting, or is it? How do I continue doing what I want to do? Or perhaps more to the point, how do I adapt my circumstances to continue doing things? So, an example, I used to love bodyboarding, as you mentioned. You get some very funny looks walking into the water with a crutch in one hand and using the bodyboard like a crutch in the other. The crutch then lies diagonally across the board and it's off to go.
Yeah, we've done quite a bit of surfing in the time, haven't we? Through the various waves, sometimes struggling to stand up, but always with a giggle. So for me, that kind of physical challenge and mental strength and emotional resilience, there's a couple of things. So for me, it's about getting through something. When you get through something that's really tough physically, it makes me realise that I can get through other things. It sort of builds for me. And I guess one of my first experiences of doing this was doing my Gold Duke of Edinburgh when I was maybe about 15. It was an 80-kilometre hike over 4 days through the Yorkshire Dales, and we got to the second day camp, and foolishly, me and my tent mate Emily, we looked at the map and the route card for the next day and realised that we were only halfway in time, but not in distance or in elevation height gain. And we had to climb Ingleborough in the morning of the last day, and it was so tough. And I remember both of us just sitting there having a hug and crying because we were so overwhelmed with the kind of physical challenge that we had ahead of us. I also recall an open water swim race. I was doing a 3K race. It was end to end of a lake in Wales. And that day it was so choppy. The water, the wind was a headwind. It was coming straight down Snowdon and straight into your face. And breathing was really challenging. Every time you looked up to sight the buoy, the way marker, you'd get like a mouthful of water, or it was kind of going up your nose, out of your ears. And it was really choking. It was really very difficult, and it was so tough, but I completed it. And events like that teaches my brain that I can get through those tough challenges, no matter how hard it is. I can push through. And it sounds quite similar to your experience, Eleanor.
Yeah. And that experience sounds remarkably the same as Saturday here in Colwyn Bay.
Yes, it was tough, wasn't it? I think there was one stage where I turned around and looked at you and you said, how many mouthfuls of water have you had? And I said, at least 50. Yeah, it was not very pleasant in Colwyn Bay on Saturday, but then Sunday was beautiful, so we're lucky.
Yeah.
Should we have a chat about how we both define resilience in our own lives and how that definition has maybe evolved over time? What are your thoughts, Eleanor?
For me, it's all about adapting my circumstances, particularly with elbow crutches, and what I want to do. Although sometimes it works the other way around. I often adapt automatically and then realise I'm doing something differently than the way I'd done it a few weeks earlier. And I have to stop and think back and work out when the change occurred and why. But it's very much resilience is there. Let's get on with it.
Sounds like it's very inbuilt for you, Eleanor, in terms of not seeing something as a challenge, but just how getting through it and then realizing that you've made that adaptation, or that adaptation rather. So for me, resilience is about getting through things no matter what is thrown at you. It's your bounce back ability. Yeah, so there are always challenges and always things that don't go as planned. I am a planner. For those that work with me know that I'm a planner, but I do recognise that we have curveballs thrown at us, and it's how we catch these, how we contain with them, how we deal with those with grace. And I think our experiences in our work and our personal lives really shape how we experience and define resilience. In my coaching conversations, leaders often need a safe space to offload, to rationalise the hard things that they're experiencing, to voice their deepest fears and concerns. Leadership is often a very lonely place, and I'd encourage anyone in that type of position to find your Emma. And what I mean by that is to find the person that you can trust to share everything with, the safe space where you can be you without any judgment. And I would say that Eleanor is one of those people for me. Quite often we'll sit in the car after a swim with our hot cup of something, cup of tea probably, or coffee, and just offload that safe space. So make sure you have that person alongside you that can support you. So let's consider some hard moments now, Eleanor. What are some of the hardest moments that you've faced in your journey, and how did you go about pushing through it?
I should have been ordained in 1983 and was told it had been deferred for a year because they didn't think I was fit enough. For instance, I'd get somebody else to hold the baby at the christening because at the time I didn't have very much grip, which I knew other ministers did. I was told, well, they're ordained, you're not. Pardon? When I was told my ordination was being deferred, the statement contained this sentence: but you've got a new colleague coming in September, which did not make sense to me. If they were saying I wasn't fit enough, well, how would a new colleague make any difference to my physical fitness? A year later, I discovered what they meant. My ex-colleague hadn't been sending in the reports that he needed to. My new colleague gave his report and was told, this isn't the same person we've heard about for the last 3 years. His reply, well, all I know about this circuit has come from Eleanor, as no records were left for me.
That's really interesting. Why do you think that happened, Eleanor? What was going on there?
My first colleague was actually heading for a breakdown. And one of the first things I did, because I had worked previously with a colleague who had a breakdown, I rang up the next in line, if you like, and said, you do realise that he's having a breakdown. His only child had got married and the marriage had ended. Not anybody else involved, but he just couldn't cope. Big wedding at the church, and then he just went to pieces.
Lots of visibility, lots of eyes on, I guess, right? Really, really interesting challenge there, Eleanor, and it shows in our roles that within our role and our success in that role, there's a really intrinsic link to those who supervise us and manage us, and that sometimes we need to show even more resilience to manage that relationship and the impact that that relationship can have on our career. So really, really important point there that you've raised. So for me personally, one of the hardest moments in a work context was when I managed a large multidisciplinary team in an energy consultancy. It was a role that I was really proud of. I was really proud of achieving it and shaping it. I worked hard to get to that position in the organisation. And in 2022, I could see that from a business perspective, despite many changes and refocuses, we were simply not making the results that the business expected. So I decided that we needed to reduce headcount drastically, and that needed to include my own role. I put 3 scenarios to my line manager. He said, you do realise that your role goes in 2 of these scenarios, which of course I did. But for me, it was the right thing to do for the business. I navigated myself and the team through this huge transition. And ultimately at that time, I made my role redundant. I'm not going to lie, the emotional and mental toll this took on me was hard. It was very lonely. Eleanor has heard many stories about this, because many of our open water swimming expeditions had this punctuated between our sessions. I worked through it by taking lots of time to think things through. I did a lot of walking, I did a lot of exercising. As I said, I took to the open water a lot and really tried to come up with a plan of what I was going to do as an individual, and then kind of ruthlessly follow that plan. And ultimately, that steered me to a career direction change, which has led me to the work that I'm doing today, which I absolutely love. I enjoy the work that I do. I have such a privileged position working with some amazing businesses and some really fascinating leaders. And I can see that some of my older learners are on the call, which is so amazing to see. And it's great to kind of have you back here. You've probably observed a lot of that through your lens, Eleanor, and our kind of friendship. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough time for you, but it was great to be part of that journey, and also to see where you are now and how
Yeah,
things have changed,
yeah, it's great.
which is
Thank
great.
you. Let's have a chat about maintaining motivation and purpose when that goal can feel either too far away or the conditions are really tough. What are your thoughts on this, Eleanor? How do we go about that?
For me, one step at a time, one day at a time, or as far as swimming is concerned, one stroke at a time.
Yeah,
That's for me. That's how I get through. Just
yeah,
taking one step at a time.
yeah. We had some really interesting pre-submitted questions on this topic, so I'll go into a little bit more detail about what I do, and maybe we'll share some models in a minute as well. So for me, breaking things down into small bite-sized pieces, exactly as you said, Eleanor, I know that an elephant can't be eaten all in one go.
Yeah.
So it's all about, okay, which bit of the elephant am I going to look at today? How do I create that small incremental change? What simple small things can I do now to make a difference tomorrow? Also accept that sometimes you might need to go backwards before you start going forwards, and it can certainly be like that in the water, can't it, Eleanor? Sometimes it really feels, if you've got particularly choppy conditions, you are actually not really going forwards. You feel like
Yeah.
you are definitely staying still, and I'm sure it felt like that when you were crossing the channel as well, actually.
Yeah,
When
when the
I'm in a
tide was against me.
Yes, exactly. When I'm in a swim race and the conditions are tough, I really do just go from one buoy to the other, small incremental steps. And I remember one swim race in an estuary in mid Wales, and it was so rough that depending on when I looked up between strokes, I might be at the base of the wave, and all I could then see was water around me. And then I'd try to time my next breath so that I was on the crest of the wave, so that I could work out where I was, make sure that I was still heading in that right direction. A really good analogy to leadership challenges, because that's what it can feel like sometimes. It can feel like all the water's just kind of swooshing around our heads. Um, let's have a look at a slide now as well, and I'm hopefully going to show you Covey's sphere of control. Really nice diagram. So effectively in the middle, you have what you can control in that middle circle. So these are the things that you can control. Then around that, you've got what you can influence. And then in that final circle, you've got kind of everything else. And so when you kind of maybe map things out a little bit, you really realize that there's lots that you have very little control or influence over. And as such, why give those aspects your time, energy, or worry? Try to bring it in a little bit. And really, the only things that we can control are our reaction and our response to a specific scenario. Okay, let's move on, Eleanor, to have a chat about leadership lessons now through adversity. So I was asked what leadership lessons I have learned from working with individuals like Eleanor and supporting Eleanor. So let me give you my perspective on it. When I get in the water with Eleanor, it's really inspiring. I mean, it's tough for me, but then I see her cope with even more than I'm dealing with, and it's inspiring. We used to leave her crutches on the beach before we had the tow float. And it was always quite amusing to see the public wanting to move them, or dogs coming up and sniffing them, or heaven forbid doing something else to them. And I was always worried that I hadn't left them far enough up the beach and maybe they'd get washed away on the incoming tide. So there was always that worry of, like, you know, have I supported Ella enough, or are these things going to end up in Conway or wherever? I've learned lots from Eleanor. So resilience, grit, determination, calmness. Eleanor is really unflappable. We communicate effectively. There are no barriers, and we really look after each other in the water. We check on each other, how each other is feeling, and it's so important when you're battling cold water, awareness of each other and how each other are. Over the weekend, we were in, I think yesterday we did about 800 meters, about 18 minutes, and it was about 6.2, was it yesterday, degrees, something like that. But over winter, we've had it dip down to 4.9. So really checking in on each other is absolutely critical with this. So if I put those observations into some leadership terms, redefining strength. So Eleanor's strength isn't necessarily speed or power or independence, but what I observe is adaptation, persistence, emotional regulation in uncertainty, all key characteristics for leaders to employ in their businesses. Eleanor is far less fearful of jellyfish and underwater objects than I am, and is unflappable when we are in the sea with jellyfish coming at us left, right and centre, whereas I'm the one running out and getting out of the way. Strong leaders aren't the loudest or the fastest. They're the ones that keep going. They're the ones that adjust intelligently and stay calm when those conditions change. Building real trust is about sharing risks. So open water removes that control. We have temperature, currents, visibility, add a spinal injury in or two, and trust between us becomes really non-negotiable. Essentially, in this scenario, trust isn't built in meeting rooms. It's built when people rely on each other under real stakes. Psychological safety comes from consistency, not reassurance in this case.
Or helping me climb a 3-foot sandbar.
Yes,
when we got out of the water.
We've been battling this over winter because the geomorphology of Colwyn Bay has changed quite a lot through winter with the storms that we've had coming in. So now we have a kind of 3-foot hill to climb. So Eleanor is lucky because she has my hand on her back to support her to get up the slope. But just helping each other, like when I was helping you with your crutches yesterday, and I stood on a barnacle rock and ended up with some cuts to my toes. So yeah, we help each other, right?
Yeah.
Unconscious bias. So assumptions are your biggest blind spot. When I first met Eleanor, we were already in the water. Didn't see Eleanor arrive on crutches or know any of her background. We swam around a really beautiful lake, Llyn at pretty good pace. And it was only when we got out and her crutches were brought to her and I stopped and I was like, hey, hang on a minute. Maybe if I had seen Eleanor on land first, I would likely arrive with some unconscious assumptions about her capability, her pace, or maybe the support needs. And I would have watched many of those quietly disappear, fall away. Good leaders replace assumptions with curiosity and observation, and the fastest way to limit performance is to define people by what you think they can't do. True inclusion is adaptive.
Has happened with me.
I'm sure
has
it
happened
has
with me with ordination. Yeah,
exactly. Can't hold the baby, so can't possibly be fit for this, right? As you described. True inclusion is adaptive, it's not equal. So when we plan our swims, we adapt, we assess the conditions and make adjustments constantly on entry points, pacing, recovery time, not to help, but to enable success. That's what this is all about. Our conversations, aren't they, Eleanor? You know, you live closer to the coast than I do, so we're quite often looking out the window before we finally agree that we're going to go. And then even sometimes when we reach the beach and we take a look from the car, nah, not today. It's not right, is it? For whatever reason.
Or we take a look, go in, and then think, this is not a good idea. So we come out again.
Exactly. And that's, I guess, why we take your crutches with us. It does allow us to get out at any stage, because we were always going
Yeah.
parallel with the shore. We're never going out to the Isle of Man, which is where we would head. We're always going parallel with the shore, so really
Yeah.
looking to sort of look after ourselves. Listening beyond words, so cold, fatigue, and restricted movement really heighten the importance of that non-verbal communication between us, the breathing, the rhythm, the hesitation. I am a bit faster than you because I use my legs as well as my arms. So I'm like a little dog where I go out and I come back and I go out and I come back, and I'm constantly checking on you so that we're never too far away from each other. Leadership takeaway here, I guess, is around, what isn't being said, energy shifts, silence, subtle resistance before problems surface. Progress isn't linear. Sometimes we have really short swims or we abort those swims, as we've said. Whether body responses, mental state, they all matter. And equally, if we're just not feeling it, we were going to do a double dip yesterday, weren't we, Eleanor? But I was beaten. I was too tired to go back in, so we called it. In high performance organizations, sustainable performance accepts variability. So leaders who demand constant upward momentum really burn people out, or they'll lose them. So making sure that you're looking after your people is really important. And purpose beats comfort. So no one swims the open water in cold conditions because it's easy. There's meaning behind it. People will endure discomfort willingly when the purpose is clear, where it's personal, where it's respected. And again, leaders who articulate purpose really unlock resilience in their teams. So Eleanor, I've chatted enough there. Let's come back to you. Let's think of how leaders cultivate resilience in their teams, especially during times of uncertainty or change. What are your thoughts on this, Eleanor?
2 words: involve them. I spent 7 years working in a rural area where money was tight, and I didn't always know if I'd get paid on the due date. So we held all sorts of fundraising events, some at my house. We had coffee mornings, and I'd go and collect from people homemade cakes and things like that if they couldn't get there, or even collect people to come and help run the stall. The folk in one village, which was about 9 miles from where I was living, no longer drove, and buses came twice a week on a Tuesday and a Saturday. So quite often I'd go and collect them to come and help, and then people came from further away, they might take them home, or I'd take them home afterwards. But everybody was involved, and if I had ideas, I would say to people at a meeting, look, I've got an idea, and I would see their faces fall. Oh no, what again? What's coming? What again? But it was very much a case of, I've got this idea. Do you think it will work? Shoot me down. That's how we all kept going through those difficult times.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree in involving them. Sometimes it's really hard as a leader when there's things that you're aware of or that you can't share, maybe yet, with the team. And managing that can be a real challenge. But as you've said, Eleanor, transparency, even if it's what you don't know, and when you might know something, that's better than nothing. I would say that communication skills are really high up on the list. Careful, considered communication, even of what you don't know, is really important. If leaders don't communicate, people will create their own narrative. If you think about it, you probably do that yourself anyway. So a WhatsApp message that doesn't get a response, your head will fill in the blank space that the lack of response has left. It's really dangerous territory for leaders who don't communicate, as individuals will fill the space with their own narrative. I would say that observation skills are also important here, Eleanor. So observing what's going on around you, how are people reacting? How do they usually react? Is their reaction now normal, typical for them as an individual? What do you notice? What's in your control to do something? Really knowing your people helps you as a leader to know what's happening to them and what's happening around them in that sort of space. What about authentic leadership? What does that look like when you're facing that personal adversity, Eleanor?
3 of the churches in that area held their own fundraising coffee mornings on a bank holiday Monday. So the August that I moved in, I went to one of those churches' coffee mornings and was introduced to one lady as, "This is our new minister." "Oh," she replied, "you've come to tell us what to do." Her face was a picture when I replied, "No, I've come to work with you." My style of leadership has always been collaborative. I try not to ask people to do something I wouldn't do, although practically speaking, that's not always easy. But because I work with volunteers, I feel that keeping them involved, being collaborative, is absolutely vital.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Working in that voluntary sector, Eleanor. I mean, there's a couple of roles that I do that are voluntary, including this one, and making sure that everybody's having that contribution, everybody's moving things forward is so important to kind of like keep team morale. Um, so for me, authentic leadership in personal adversity looks like how you're showing up without losing your standards. So it's showing up as you are without losing those standards. And what I mean by that in practice is being honest about the struggle without oversharing or playing the victim, but being comfortable to be yourself in that personal adversity. Um, Having self-awareness, including high levels of emotional intelligence and using discipline from that. So that could be from delivering feedback to communicating effectively with colleagues. Staying values led is really important, particularly when it's much easier to cut corners when you are in adverse conditions. One area that I am not particularly good at is asking for support, but asking for support instead of pretending you're fine is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength to use the colleagues around you. Remaining accountable for your role and decisions, so not just walking away from the challenges, and modeling resilience rather than perfection. Also, authentic leaders really inspire faith. They inspire and mobilize people around them. So for me, the bottom line here is that people trust leaders who are real, are responsible, and are steady under pressure, not invincible, because nobody is invincible. So how about the balance of vulnerability and strength as a leader? What would you say there? How do you balance that, Eleanor?
Picking up on words you've just used, be yourself. I remember when I went to college to train for the ministry, I packed everything into my car and wondered how I was going to carry everything up the stairs to my room because I wasn't supposed to lift heavy weights. As I parked my car, someone was passing who asked, "Need a hand? I'll go and get some friends." And that's exactly what happened. They went off, got some friends, came back, and my car was emptied pretty quickly without me having to lift very much. It's always difficult to admit you need help, but it actually opens doors, and possibly some unexpected ones.
Yeah, excellent. And I guess my perspective on this, I feel it's quite similar to how I've answered previously. I would say that being yourself is really key here, creating a psychologically safe space for you to be you and for your colleagues to be themselves is really important. We all have challenges, and owning those challenges goes a really long way. I'm going to share another model now because I am the model queen after all. There's a really great model by Ken Blanchard, and it's called the ABCD model. And it stands for able, believable, connected, and dependable. And in principle, if any one of those 4 elements is missing from your work relationships, it's going to feel a bit skewed. So you could use this simple tool and kind of think about the relationships that you have within your organization between yourself and direct reports or others. And if any one of those, as I say, is missing, you're going to feel like there's something not quite right. It's a great model that I use when I'm coaching leaders as well. So thank you for sharing that one. Let's have a think now about sharing a moment where resilience directly influenced your leadership decisions. So, Eleanor, what might you come up with here?
Perhaps not so much decisions, but going back to ordination being deferred for 12 months. It was very much a case, as far as I was concerned, of you say I can't do it, I'm not fit enough, I'll prove I can. And thanks, in no small part, to a change of colleague. Or as his wife said later, if we hadn't come when we did, you would not have been ordained. And that means that I would have had to look for another job and another pathway, etc.
Yeah.
So it was partly a case of I'll prove I can. But then thankfully I also had help in that as somebody who stuck up for me.
I think some of that is very much a mindset. Yeah. So there's a question around, how do some people have more resilience than others? Is it a nature or a nurture type of situation? And, you know, in that example that you've given there, you're so headstrong. Yeah, you were going to make that happen, and no one was going to get in your way, crutches or no crutches, I would say. What are your thoughts? I'm going
It's
off
like
script a
open
bit
water.
here, but what are your
Well, it's
thoughts
like open water swimming, isn't it? Have crutches, we'll go.
Yeah. I guess my example around resilience and how it's influenced leadership decisions, I guess the example I gave earlier around making my role redundant, in the run up to that decision, I took a trip to Kuwait. And this was to try to secure a multi-million-dollar contract that would have ultimately secured the future of the team. Lots of peers had visited the client ahead of me and laid the foundations for winning the contract. But as I was ultimately making the decision about the team's future, I needed to go myself and try all that I could to engage with the client and to ascertain the chances of winning the work, and if so, when. It was a really tough trip because I had the weight of 50 plus roles on my shoulder and the expectation of results to be delivered. I already had a good working relationship with the client and I was really well trusted. I was also able to ask frank, honest and open questions to really ascertain the chances of securing the contract. And ultimately, you've read the end of this story because I've told you, but ultimately when I left Kuwait with the answer, I knew what the next steps were. And it took real determination and guts to make that trip. I dialed up my resilience. It wasn't comfortable, but it was essential for me to make that trip, for me to then make the right decision for the team's future. So I guess that's an example I would give.
Thinking back to that situation of 3 years not knowing whether I was going to be ordained, if you like, or assuming I was going to be, I had a studies supervisor and we were talking about the situation one day and I was telling him what things were like. And a few months later, he came to me, well, we met, and the first thing he said was, Eleanor, I owe you an apology. After you had told me, I said to my wife, Eleanor's over-exaggerating. And then I took your colleague to a meeting and I came back and I said to my wife, she was not over-exaggerating, she was under-exaggerating. Now, he needn't have told me that. And I think that's another key thing for leadership is honesty. Yeah. He was honest. I didn't know what he'd said to his wife, either about over-exaggerating or not. But he had the grace, the courage, if you like, to say to me, I was wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
And it's is that feedback, isn't it, Eleanor? That feedback back to you then
Yep.
allows you to make that adjustment in terms of, oh, okay, well, I was right and actually I was understating it. It gives you that confidence, I would say, to continue
Yeah.
operating in the way that you are, which is so important as a leader.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation around adventure and challenge mindset. So, what inspired the idea of swimming 71-mile swims to celebrate that milestone birthday a few years ago?
Well, ASPIRE stands for Association for Spinal Injury Research, Rehabilitation and Reintegration. And I've been swimming for them, raising money for several years. And I knew my 70th birthday was looming. And I don't know whether I heard somebody doing something similar, but I suddenly thought, 1 mile in 70 different places sounds like a fun challenge to do. Living here in North Wales, we've got plenty of beaches and lakes to start me off. And I actually started that challenge just after my 69th birthday because I knew that over the winter it would be too cold to swim 1 mile at a time. During that challenge, we spent a month with friends in America. And with one exception, all the open water swimming venues were closed. But lots of their friends said, well, you can come and swim in our garden pool if you like. Of course, the only trouble was they were small. And we had to measure how long they were. And I would start swimming while my friend would get her mobile phone out and calculate how many times and how many lengths I had to swim. I think the record was 310, which was a case of push off, and I didn't need to swim a stroke before I got to the other end.
I love it.
But it was a great fun challenge for me. And I actually did, well, strictly speaking, it was swim number 72, but the final swim was on my birthday at Aspire's headquarters in Stanmore in Middlesex, where they have a pool that is fully accessible and also where there's a gym that's fully accessible. And incidentally, it's where one of the national teams trained for the volleyball and basketball competition at when the World Olympic Games was in London.
Excellent. Excellent. Let's talk a little bit about mental preparation. So how do you mentally prepare for open water swims in kind of extreme conditions, particularly in winter? What do you do?
Just get in and do it. You've already said, we look at the conditions.
Yeah.
We decide whether it's okay. And if it is, we go. And sometimes it looks okay. But when we get in, either because one of us gets knocked over by a wave or we actually manage to just stay standing, we'll look at each other and say no and come out again.
Yeah. It's funny because it is a just do it, isn't it? And in this one, I think I actually really look forward to the peace that it brings inside me. It's less about mental preparation and more like mental release. And I say it all the time, but all I can do is breathe. I can't worry about what's happening at home or in work. I've just got to get the air in. And no matter how cold we get, we always come out with a smile on our face. And for me, a much more peaceful mind. I'm going to skip through some of these questions because I want to make sure that we have time for the audience questions, Eleanor. So let's talk a little bit about fear. So how do you approach fear, whether it's fear of failure, physical pain, or the unknown? What do you do with fear?
Ask myself why I'm afraid. So what am I afraid of? And certainly for me, as believe it or not, I have got incredibly more and more, not sure I really can keep going doing this much longer. What's the worst case scenario? I know when I had the first accident, and I listened to two doctors looking at my x-rays, and one said I'd cracked the vertebrae and the other one said I hadn't. What's the worst case scenario? I'll end up in a wheelchair. Okay, if that happens, then this and this. And having worked out the worst case, you just get on with it.
Yeah.
And if I fail, well, at least I've tried.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we all struggle with uncertainty and lack of clarity. And for me, it's part of me likes to have control and to know what the plan is. But I recognise that there's plenty of scenarios in work and life that we just simply don't have control over. And I guess we all learn our coping mechanisms with those. I don't think I've really rationalised or worked out how to cope with the physical pain. I'm not going to lie. When we're in the water, particularly January time, it hurts. It hurts everywhere. My fingernails feel like they've been bashed by hammers, and then the balls of my feet, because I don't have anything on my feet, are so uncomfortable when I walk across the frozen sand and the tarmac back to the car. It hurts. It really does. But I've made a choice. I've made a choice to do it. And whilst it might hurt right now, I know that I'll feel better in the long term. My head always feels clearer, no matter how hard that swim's been. An hour or so after the cold water swimming, my whole body feels the after effect, an inner glow, toasty and warm hands and body, and it's really bliss. There's no shame in failure. We always try to work out from the scenario what we do differently. And that's exactly the coaching mindset that I employ with people that I work with. I believe it builds rapport. And it shows that I'm no better than the next person. We all fail all the time, but it's how we deal with it that matters. Let's move on, Eleanor, to some pre-submitted questions. So we had one from Erica. Erica asked us, can you share your views on the importance of resilience alongside resourcefulness? So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, Eleanor.
I think it's resilience that keeps you going, that helps you think, I've done that, I've got through that, so I can keep going again. And it's resourcefulness that sometimes provides you with the tools to do so. Very simple one. You've already mentioned crutches didn't always stay where we'd left them on the beach. Some people actually took them away, or at least put them up at the top of the beach. And how are we going to get around this one? And so, with a bit of Googling and things, I came up with a spearfishing tow float, the red one that was on the picture. And we can quite simply have crutches, we'll go.
Yeah. So, sorry, go on.
Well, it was a case of, I wanted to keep swimming. We need to get over the fact that people move my crutches. Litter pickers think they're litter, funnily enough. And so how do we get round it? How do we find an answer? And we did. Yeah.
For me, for this one, great question, Erica. Thank you for sending it in. So, as I've said, resilience is the bounce back ability, like I've described earlier. And for me, resourcefulness is knowing what you can do, who you can call on to help you when things are tough. And I think that if you've just got resilience without resourcefulness, you might be a bit stuck in terms of finding those ways forward. So having both of them together, I think, are really important. So we've got one in from Teresa. When all seems lost, what thoughts or strategies help to maintain clarity and momentum? What are your thoughts here, Eleanor?
For me, it's where my faith comes in. I talk to God. Sometimes, if I'm really frustrated or in a lot of pain, I'll shout at him. And as one person said, he's big enough to take it. So I will bring situations to God and seek his help. Sometimes it might just be, I'm not quite sure what to do in this situation. Help! One word prayer. But the answer comes. And if you think about people's experience, if you've been in a situation where something's happened unexpectedly and you've just had to get on with it, and then you look back and think, where did those words come from? How did I do that? So look back, see how far you've come, and then you've got the strength to carry on.
Yeah, excellent. I think one thing that really helps me here is really taking a breath and pausing. Sometimes there's that rush of emotion, isn't there? That there's that temptation to react and respond. So really trying to take a breath a bit, coming inside your body. If things are even more challenging, then taking myself out of that situation. So maybe a walk with the dog, a swim, or a mindful cup of tea can also really help to kind of gain that mental clarity. So hopefully some tips there. I think it's worth us coming on to some of the live questions. So let's take one from John Rawling. How can we learn from setbacks but then leave them behind and move on? What are your thoughts on that, Eleanor? How can we learn from setbacks but leave them behind and move on?
I mean, I suppose in some ways I've mentioned it partly in that you look back and see what you've done, and then you carry on. Sometimes you just need to stop and actually think not so much about the difficult situation, but about things that make you happy. And one of the things I've learned over the years is that if you don't leave a setback behind, you can't move on fully. And that's a difficult one to do because things keep on reminding us in our brains, usually when it's a quiet moment. But for me, it's been, okay, that was a setback. Now what am I going to do? And simply put it behind you. It's hard, but if you don't put it behind you and don't come to terms with it, you'll only partially move on.
Yeah, excellent. I think learning from setbacks and leaving them behind, some things that I do personally, I do a lot of journaling, so I'll write things down. I also do some voice notes on WhatsApp to myself. So sometimes if I need to actually, maybe can't get the words out quick enough as I'm writing, I will voice note it. I don't always listen back to them, but it just allows that offload. I had a coach that I worked with personally for a while who got me visualizing things. So I used to visualize an idea. So at the time, I was needing to generate a lot of ideas for the business, and a lot of those ideas I was generating weren't going anywhere, either wrong time, wrong place, not enough budget, all of those sorts of things. But my role was to generate ideas, and I used to find it really difficult when those ideas maybe weren't listened to, weren't heard. So I used to imagine them. I used to imagine tying the idea onto a helium balloon, opening the window and then letting them go and just watching them drift out of the window. And that sort of visualization I found quite powerful in just allowing me to let it go. Like, I've voiced my idea. I told you why I think it's a really great idea and why we should do it. And you know what? It's up to you whether we do it or not. That wasn't my role. So that visualization of just letting it go, leaving it behind, moving on, I found really helpful. So thank you for that question, John. Let's take another one. So this is Stuart Long. So from the outside, resilience often looks like strength and steadiness. On the inside, it can feel like barely keeping your head above water. Great analogy there, thank you. What guidance do leaders need when they can feel down and out? So again, what would you say with that one, Eleanor?
I think what we all need is a friend or a couple of friends who believe in us. People that we can talk to, that we can share that sense of drowning under the weight of responsibility. And he'll say, but you know, you can do this. You know what you've done in the past. And maybe sometimes they remind us of how we've come through things. And they'll believe in us to trust us to be able to come through. And it's those, I think you said people like Emma, didn't you, earlier on? People that you can trust, you can let off steam to and know it won't go any further, but also people who will encourage you to keep going.
Yeah, excellent.
Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm not going to provide any more comment on that one. I just want to take one more question, and then I'll do some wrap up from today. So, this is a question from David Bolton, and the question is: can you tell us about a time when resilience didn't look like pushing through, and what you had to unlearn as a leader in that moment? What might you say there, Eleanor? So, where you didn't push through?
I must admit, quickly, I can't think of anything. But sometimes, as a leader, yes, you can think, not so much pushing through, but I didn't handle that very well. Why didn't I handle it very well? What can I do if that's caused a fracture in a relationship? What can I do to rebuild? Or what can I do to handle that sort of situation better?
Yeah, so it's bringing that reflection piece in, isn't it, Eleanor? And I think that was where my mind was going here in terms of how I would answer this. It's really, I think the unlearning here, Dave, is around, doing that reflection piece of, oh crikey, that didn't quite go according to plan. Maybe bringing a greater level of intentionality to the next interaction and thinking, okay, a bit of risk management. So what's likely to happen in this space? How might people respond and react? And what might I as a leader need to do differently in order to navigate us into a different outcome, is probably what I would say. Excellent. Anything else that you want to add, Eleanor, before I go through our key takeaways?
No, you can do
brilliant.
the key takeaways.
Thank you. So thank you so much for all your participation today, for the questions that were pre-submitted and the ones that are live. I'm sorry we haven't had time to answer more, but hopefully you've all taken something away from today. In terms of my key takeaways, a couple for you. So I've really heard around resilience growing through challenge, experience and reflection. So both Eleanor and myself really emphasise that resilience isn't innate, it's built. Physical challenges like the open water swimming or my Duke of Edinburgh expedition, emotional difficulties and professional adversity all strengthen our ability to get through things and to adapt when conditions change. And so that resilience piece is really important, that flex muscle. Like a muscle that we go to the gym and train, we have to do the same with resilience. If we stop training it, we lose the ability to use that muscle. Leadership really requires that safe space and trust and emotional honesty. So leaders often feel isolated, as we've explored. Your message, the message here is that I'm stressing that you need that safe space to offload, to reflect, to think clearly, to have that critical friend. And we've talked about the open water. Trust and communication and observing what isn't said is really critical, and strength is shown in our calmness, our adaptability, and asking for help. Adversity really shapes authentic leadership. So facing tough decisions like restructuring the team that I described, or the ordination delay, really demands kind of clarity, courage, and values-led behaviour. Authentic leadership isn't about perfection, it's about showing up as yourself, truthfully, communicating transparently, staying accountable, and really modelling resilience with humanity and humility. As we've said, progress is rarely linear, and that's okay. Whether it's a rough open water swim or a high pressure leadership role, momentum is built through small, deliberate steps. Breaking goals down, focusing on what you can control, and accepting temporary backwards movement really helps to maintain motivation when that end and that goal can feel so far away. And it's all about resourcefulness as well. So knowing who and what you can draw upon is really important. So when all seems lost, purpose, reflection and perspective can help maintain that clarity. So I'd like to thank Eleanor for her time today. It's been great seeing you out of the water. No doubt I shall see you at the weekend in the water. And thanks for all your participation today and your thoughtful questions. We really hope that you have enjoyed the session. I will pass back to CMI.
That's it for today's session. Thank you to Emma and Eleanor for your insight and expertise. Stay tuned to hear more about CMI membership, and thank you for joining us today.
Don't forget, as a CMI member, you can find the latest management and leadership insights at managers.org.uk. If you're not yet a member, join our community to discover CMI Confidence with on-demand resources, our network of mentors, and industry-leading accreditations.